The Giants did it again. They surprised people in the industry by giving a qualifying offer to a player that many thought they weren't going to give one to. Joc Pederson gets the qualifying offer from the Giants. We'll talk about what it means next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And where we start today is with the surprising news that the Giants extended the $19.65 million qualifying offer not only to Carlos Rodón, which was a foregone conclusion, but they give one to Joc Pederson as well. And on our show, we literally said maybe 5+ times that it was a possibility they would give him one. And I did not see anybody else mentioning it as a possibility, but maybe I just missed that. But he gets one. And, you know, this is actually going to be a mailbag edition of the show. And the first questions are about Joc Pederson. So let's just ask the questions and then we'll answer the whole situation in the context of the questions. JP says, Ben, please make sense of the Joc qualifying offer. Is it because Giants management thinks he will be positively impacted by the changing situation with defensive shifts next year? He is a platoon player and an average at best defensive outfielder. And SF Giants Jake says, is Joc Pederson receiving the qualifying offer a sign the Giants are about to spend big? So there's a ton to unpack, but the first question makes sense of the qualifying offer. So for those who don't know, the way that this works, the qualifying offer is a set amount every year. It's the average of the top 125 highest paid players in the game. So it changes every year. It actually went down in 2021 for the first time ever from 2020, but then it went back up this year and it's $19.65 million. And you can give it to your own free agents as long as they were on your team all year and as long as they've never gotten one before. And Rodón was an obvious case, because you make this offer and they can accept it or reject it. And it's 1 year, $19.65 million. So obviously Rodón would reject it. But for Pederson, this is why it's so interesting, is because he is definitely a candidate to accept the qualifying offer. And the fact is, most players reject the qualifying offer. In fact, the last two players in baseball who have accepted the qualifying offer were Kevin Gausman a couple of years ago and Brandon Belt last year, two Giants players. So the Giants have been the most aggressive team in baseball under this front office, frankly, in giving these out. And it adds to the abundance of evidence that they don't mind paying a hefty annual value if it's on a short-term deal. And so in Pederson, what they're doing here is saying, we want the player back. This might be a little bit of an overpay, but we like him enough that we don't mind doing that. And it also hurts his market in terms of other teams signing him, because if he were to reject the Giants qualifying offer, and then if he were to sign with another team, the team that signs him would surrender a draft pick, kind of different draft picks depending on if they're a team that has exceeded the luxury tax, if they're a team that receives revenue sharing, or if they're neither. But regardless, you're getting a player who's not an elite player, and you have to pay the money plus a draft pick. And so it hurts that market for that player. And so this dramatically increases the odds of Joc Pederson coming back to the Giants. And I think that's ultimately the point. They want him back. They don't mind spending a little bit more than they might otherwise have had to bring him back. And plus, they don't know for sure if he would have, if they made him the same offer as a team that was like a slam dunk playoff team at this moment, would he go to the playoff team? It seems like that was his preference. I'm not saying the Giants won't make the playoffs, but at this early stage of the offseason, they have so much to do on their roster that it's not clear yet, but Pederson has to make a decision quickly. It's always been 10 days, and yet I've seen Maria Guardado of sfgiants.com and I've seen Jeff Passan of ESPN say that the deadline for a decision by the player is Tuesday, but that is not 10 days from now. So I'm going to have to confirm that, but it may be Tuesday or it may be 10 days. If it's Tuesday, then it's changed from what it was in the past, which was 10 days. So anyway, the reason some people are like concerned about this, I guess, is that, like you mentioned, he's a flawed player. He's not an everyday player. He's a platoon player, and he's not great defensively. But the point is, he's not just a platoon player. He's like one of the very best platoon players out there. And when I look at the numbers, like, he's pretty comparable to Kyle Schwarber, who last offseason got a 4-year, $79 million contract. I'm not saying Joc Pederson should get a 4-year, $79 million contract, but what I am saying is that even though Pederson was quite poor defensively in 2022, average, you're right, I think is giving him too much credit for what he did this year. He was bad this year defensively, but in his career, he's been closer to average, a little bit below average defensively. He's only 30 years old, so I don't see that this is like irreversible decline defensively. I think that some reporters mentioned conditioning was an issue. Pete Patella, the new Giants general manager, is like known for player development, including helping guys come into camp in the best shape that they can be in. And so I can easily see like him being better defensively next year. Plus, I think they're clearing playing time at the DH spot if he does in fact come back. So what you're getting is like upper tier offense against right-handed pitching, and that's mostly it. But what I'm trying to say is that even when he was so bad defensively in 2022, he was still worth, according to Fangraphs, about $16.5 million in terms of the production. So if you can just be a little better defensively, or even perhaps if you're just out in the field less defensively and you're DHing more and you're not actively hurting your team on defense, he can be even better than he was. But as good as he was, it was still worth close to the qualifying offer amount. And so I think this is an aggressive decision, but it's not like some absolutely insane decision. And regarding the question from SF Giants Jake, is Pederson receiving the qualifying offer a sign the Giants are about to spend big? This is the one question that if you are upset in any way about Joc Pederson getting the qualifying offer, the only reason that is legitimate to be upset is if it prevents them from doing other things. And the reason I said I didn't think ultimately they would give it to him is because I said I don't think they want to commit to about $20 million to a, like we've talked about, good but flawed player in some ways this early in the offseason when they have so much they need to do to address the weaknesses of their team. And so it does tell me, I mean, it does it better mean that they're going to spend big, because if they were somehow limited to that, $160-ish million payroll where they've been at the last few years, and they have about $60 million to spend to get to that point, accounting for arbitration salaries, and then you're committing a third of it immediately to Joc Pederson, that would be a problem. And so it probably does mean that, SF Giants Jake, but if it doesn't, then that's a problem. But if they're willing to just blow past that number, then it doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, Pederson was one of their best players. He was an extremely popular player with fans in the clubhouse. And if it doesn't impede them from doing other things, there's really nothing negative about this. And the beauty of a one-year deal is that even if it goes poorly, it's over after 1 year and you can pivot to something else. And so the question is, will he accept it? He's definitely a candidate to accept it, and we're going to know soon. And coming up next, we'll pivot to the other free agents out there, get into a bunch of questions about Aaron Judge and others. But before we get into that, BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and even esports. We've got it all at BetOnline, and even the MLB offseason. This has been one of my favorite things to discuss over the last few weeks is the odds coming out at BetOnline. They recently put out an over-under on the next contract for Aaron Judge, the number was set at $375 million. And I came on right away and said that take the under on that. He's not getting $375 million. Even if he did, that would be like an extremely positive outcome for Judge. And it shouldn't be what an over-under was set at with equal odds, whether you took the over or the under. So I hope you took that bet. I'm sure it's moved by now. I haven't checked, but all kinds of off-season stuff at BetOnline. We're the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, more questions and answers. I hope I answered that Pederson one thoroughly enough. If it doesn't hold them back from doing other things, then there's really nothing negative to say about it. He was a popular player. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. So, the next couple of questions. Adrian says, how much would be too much for Judge? And then Christy says, am I the only one that thinks a 7 to 8 year deal for Aaron Judge is a long one since he is 31? And yeah, no, you're not. I'm sitting here thinking the same thing. For those who have been following the show, I was anxiously anticipating Fangraphs, ESPN, MLB Trade Rumors putting out their annual contract prediction pieces. And they've done so. And I've entered them all into a spreadsheet and I've averaged them. I've looked at the mean, the median. And for Judge, those are my favorite three sources there. And Fangraphs and ESPN predicted, actually, Christy, 9 years. And MLB Trade Rumors predicted 8. And so none of the three even said 7. They're talking 8-9 as opposed to 7-8. And the median total contract that they've predicted is 9 years, $324 million. And so in terms of how much would be too much for Judge, really significantly over $300 million is where I start to squirm a little bit, because as much as I like Aaron Judge and I think they should pursue him until the very end, and there's the fact that there's possibly mutual interest given the geography and that the Giants are the team he grew up rooting for, and his family and his wife's family are in Linden, 90 minutes away from Oracle Park. And so that's a big part of it, because you can have interest all you want in a lot of these guys who are the top free agents, but if they don't really want to play for you, then you might end up with nobody, even though you gave it, your best shot. And so for that reason, and the fact that Judge is, if not number one, he's certainly a top 2 or 3 free agent. I mean, he's the best right now, but that's the thing. Is he going to be the best 9 years from now? Definitely not. And, you look at Carlos Correa is 3 years younger than Aaron Judge, 2.5 years technically, but like the median predicted contract for Correa is 9 years, $288 million. So would you rather give a guy, if it takes 9 years, would you rather give it to a guy who's 28 or a guy who's 31? Even if the player who's 31 is a little bit better, the one who's 28 might end up being the better deal in the entirety. And so that I do start to squirm when we start looking at these 8-9 years, $325-ish million predicted contracts for Judge. And then suddenly, to me, Correa, Trey Turner, very good players, start to seem like a little bit more level-headed. I think the Judge it's kind of like mania over the season he just had, but maybe it moved the needle enough to project him to be that much better player. Even though Turner and Correa are like extremely good, maybe Judge is like a notch above them, even though in his career they've actually kind of all been similar on a per season type of basis. So how much would be too much? I think I answered that. And no, Christy, you're not the only one. I do start to squirm as well. If the Giants could find a way to offer him what he wants over 6 or 7 years versus 8 or 9 years, I think that is maybe more realistic, but we'll see. We're going to find out. So Section 31 says, if they don't get Judge, who do you see as the next most likely? And it's kind of a toss-up for me between Carlos Correa and Trey Turner. As I look at the top free agents and I've seen all these predicted contracts, what I'm kind of landing on ultimately is that I don't know that I'm saying I think it's for sure likely or whatever, but I'm saying I think that the Giants perhaps end up with one of the top three, and that's Judge, Correa, and Trey Turner. Xander Bogaerts seems to be a slight tier below the Correa and Turner tier. And so who's the next most likely? Did I already say this? I think it's a toss-up between Correa and Trey Turner. So, yeah, the next most likely impact player. There's certainly like lesser players who are perhaps more likely than any of them. But if we're talking like impact, I see perhaps one of those top three coming to the San Francisco Giants. They appear primed for that. But again, we will have to wait and find out. Next question from Political Theory. Assume Trey Turner is open to playing second base and center, in addition to some shortstop for 1 year. In this scenario, is he a better fit for the Giants than Aaron Judge and maybe less risky with health and age long term, or is Judge's power and star power more important? So I think that, in some ways, yes, because of what I just said. The Judge being 31, and if it's going to take 9 years, it depends on how long of a contract Judge requires. If he does end up needing 9 years, I really would seriously consider pivoting to Correa and Turner. I don't think Judge is quite like on a whole different stratosphere than those two to warrant giving him a deal that is going to be ugly, maybe for like 4 years at the end. Maybe, yeah. We're really talking about paying him through his age 39 season in that case, and that's kind of crazy for a guy his size. He's definitely going to be probably a DH at the last several years of that. And I'm talking about paying Pederson $20 million to be a platoon DH, so I don't know. I think Trey Turner may be a better fit. It depends on the years, though. And Judge's star power, I get that. I think a lot of fans respond to me when I say this by saying, but Judge is the only one who puts butts in the seats. And I think in a lot of ways that's true. Although if you have Trey Turner and you go out and get some other guys, if signing one of these other guys gives you more money to spend on others, then you could put together just maybe a deeper team and perhaps, having some star talent, not quite on the level of Judge, and a really good competitive team would drive people to the seats. So those are the decisions they have to make. I think that there's no doubt Judge would be the biggest splash and draw the biggest interest and sell the most jerseys and on and on and on. But it's not like with Correa and Trey Turner. Trey Turner, yeah, these are some of the best players in the game also. It's not like there's a huge drop-off. So the next round of questions is about how many players do I think the Giants are going to end up with from this free agent class, and what makes me believe that any of them would even want to come to the Giants outside of perhaps Aaron Judge. So we'll get to those questions in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, more questions and answers. Drew says, how many everyday bats do you see the Giants adding this offseason? Currently, you could argue they only have 2 or 3. Crawford, Flores, maybe Estrada. Ideally, they should have 4 to 5 in their lineup and platoon the rest. How many platoon bats do I see them adding? Yeah, I think that you're spot on in that they have 2 or 3 and that they probably need to add 2 or 3. So I would say at least 2. I would expect them. Like I said, I really do think maybe I'll expand it just a tad to say one of the top 4 free agents I do expect them to come away with in Judge, Correa, Turner, and Bogaerts. And once you do that, if you do that, then at least just one other guy. But I could really see them, and it doesn't have to be a free agent. And you didn't say that. You said how many do I think they'll add? So it could be a trade, and it could be free agency. But I would expect at least 2 to 3 more everyday players to be added this offseason. Tosh says, what makes you think any of the top 15 free agents besides Judge would want to sign with the Giants at market rate? And then I saw somebody replied to you with exactly the words taken out of my mouth, which is that money talks. So you say at market rate. So I think what you're kind of implying is like if the Giants offered a contract and then they had like other contracts that were the same, or at least like almost exactly the same, why would they want to come to the Giants over those other teams? And it just depends. I mean, if literally they're getting the same offers, they have their choice. I wouldn't be able to answer the question as to what the players prefer. We do know with Judge the hometown connection, but as far as I know, there really isn't much of that with any of these other top 15. You said top 15, yeah, guys. Brandon Nimmo is from Wyoming near Denver, and so maybe he might want to play for a Western Division team so that he can, especially NL West, so that they can go to Colorado. Less now. It used to be 3 times a year, and now it's only 2 times a year with the changes of the schedule. But yeah, I mean, what I'm saying that if they want to come away with these guys, they'd have to pay a little bit. I mean, you say market rate. So again, I'm assuming there are other contracts, but if you offer a little bit more, I think that money does talk. And especially if you offer, a compellingly more, like, some percentage more. So they understand that they've got to make it compelling enough to get the player. And if you don't, they don't sign with you. So they understand. That's how the business has always worked. And to say top 15, I mean, that's a lot of guys. Top 15 goes all the way to, who do I have as the 15th best free agent? I've got Jamison Tyone. I mean, there's a lot of pitchers mixed in. Pitchers want to play here. So maybe you mean top 15 hitters. Like, they've had no problem luring pitchers, especially guys who are trying to rebuild some value. And it's a good place to pitch. So the top 15 hitters, it's a different story. And maybe that's why you just go all in on Judge, because there may be that actual mutual interest in playing in this ballpark, even though it's a tough place to play. And it's historically been hard to lure hitters here. So Ryan says, will the Giants' payroll be in the top 5 ever? And so, I mean, they've been in the top 5 before. So I assume you don't mean like in the past, because ever, yes, they have been in the past. But in terms of, I'm trying to look at what would it have needed to be this year to be top 5. It looks like Boston was at number 5 according to Roster Resource on Fangraphs at $221 million. And the Giants were at 162 according to Roster Resource, number 13. But I wouldn't get so worked up on the numbers, because if they spent, a little over 10 million more, like 15 million more, they'd be in the top 10. And so you can move pretty quickly when a bunch of teams are bunched together. So I don't pay too much attention. It's more like, what is the average? What is the median? What is the mean? And they're above the mean and the median. So they're above average, but they're not near the top 5. It's true. So will they be top 5 in 2023? That would be fantastic, but I wouldn't put money on it. Certainly, they'd have to add 60 million in annual commitments over what they did this year to have made the top 5 in 2022. But I could definitely see it if they become a juggernaut like the Dodgers have been. Like, if they're just perennially really good, I mean, it's not out of the question since they've done it before. I think first let's get them around 200 million, get them to push past that, and then we can talk about being top 5. Next question from Chris. How many free agents will the Giants sign? Over, under 2.5? And for me, it's an easy over on this number, because I think the last couple years have kind of slept on how active they've been. They don't make the big splash per se, but I'm looking at their 2022 additions, and they signed a lot of their own free agents, but free agents nonetheless. Carlos Rodón, Brandon Belt, Anthony DeSclafani, Alex Wood, Alex Cobb, Matthew Boyd, Jacob Junis, Joc Pederson, and during the season, Trevor Rosenthal, 2 major league contracts. And so that's way over 3. And this year they have more to do. And even if we look at 2021, it's loading for me. Kevin Gausman, Tommy LaStella, Kurt Casale, Jake McGee, Matt Whistler, Tyler Chatwood, Jose Alvarez, Alex Wood, Anthony DeSclafani, Aaron Sanchez, and John Brebbia. So they're always active. It's just a lot of times they're not the hugest of deals, but I would expect them to continue to be like high volume in trying to improve this roster. But the difference hopefully will be that there's some bigger impact names mixed in, and it's not just a bunch of these smaller signings. But easy over for me. If anyone's offering you those odds, I would take the over. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's like the sports page of old, but now in podcast form with the local experts on the biggest stories. It's great. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. Coming up on Monday, we're going to get to more mailbag questions and or any news now that free agency is fully open that takes place over the weekend. So I can't wait to be with you then. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.